The notification's pale glow pierced the darkness of my downtown apartment just past 11 o'clock on the night of December 19th. I'd been reviewing quarterly financials when my phone vibrated against the glass coffee table, a sharp buzz that made my wine glass tremble. Motion detected. Koi Pond. South Garden. I didn't panic. Panic is what amateurs do. Instead, I set down my pen, picked up my phone, and opened the security app with the same calm precision I used to review contracts. The 4K night vision footage loaded instantly, revealing every detail in crisp monochrome. The water feature I'd engineered with my own hands, the meticulously raked gravel patterns, the ancient podocarpus trees that had cost me more than most people's cars. And there, standing beside my $50,000 koi pond, wine glasses catching the moonlight like crystalline weapons, were my younger sister Scarlett and her fiancé Evan. I increased the volume. Their voices came through with perfect clarity. "It's a gold mine," Evan said, gesturing grandly at the water. His real estate agent's swagger was fully deployed, the same body language he probably used to sell overpriced condos to desperate buyers. The foreign investment group lands on the morning of the 21st, 10 o'clock sharp. They need to dump the budget before the fiscal year ends, so they're desperate to close before Christmas. He took a long sip of wine, probably from my parents' collection, the expensive Bordeaux my father saved for special occasions. "Once they see this garden," Evan continued, "they'll tack on an extra $400,000 to the offer immediately. After the ink dries, we kick Nora to the curb. By then, it's a done deal." I watched Scarlett giggle that high-pitched, performative laugh she'd perfected for her Instagram videos. She's going to lose her mind. But who cares? It's Mom and Dad's deed. Anything planted in the ground belongs to the land, right? That's what you said. Exactly. Fixtures become real estate. It's basic property law. My heart rate actually slowed. I took a screenshot, then another. I downloaded the video file and immediately uploaded it to 3 separate cloud storage accounts. I looked at the timestamp. They wanted to sell my assets at 10 o'clock a.m. on the 21st? Too bad my showroom was scheduled to close at that time. I am 42 years old. I own Bennett Greenery, a landscape architecture firm that has designed gardens for Fortune 500 headquarters, luxury resorts, and the kinds of private estates that never appear in real estate listings because they're sold through whispered conversations at country clubs. My family sees me as a glorified gardener. They have never understood that 5 years ago, when my father Charles called me into his study with that particular tone, the one that meant he was about to ask for something while pretending it was for my benefit, I signed a contract. A real, legally binding contract, drafted by my corporate attorney, David Ross. The terms were simple. I would invest $300,000 of my own capital to transform their overgrown, embarrassing backyard into what the contract called a live showroom facility. They would get a 5-star living space for free. I would get a venue to bring VIP clients, a place where CEOs and resort managers could walk through a fully mature garden and see exactly what they were buying, rather than squinting at architectural renderings and imagining what a Japanese maple might look like in 10 years. For 10 years, I would maintain the property at no cost to them. In exchange, I retained full ownership of all inventory and installation materials planted on the property, with the explicit right to remove said inventory, should the agreement be terminated early, or should asset security be compromised. My father had signed it while watching a football game. My mother had signed it without reading past the first paragraph. They thought they were getting free landscaping from their daughter. I was building a $300,000 investment portfolio disguised as a garden. The memory surfaced with bitter clarity. 36 hours ago, at Scarlett's engagement party, the backyard glowing with string lights and the air thick with the synthetic joy of people pretending to be happier than they were, Evan had cornered me near the bar, shoving a stack of papers into my hands. Music pounded from the speakers, some top 40 song Scarlett had insisted was essential, and guests laughed too loudly over their third glasses of champagne. "Just a permit for the patio extension, Nora," he'd shouted over the noise, his breath sharp with whiskey. "Your signature on the 3rd page. Quick favor for your sister's fiancé." I'd been distracted, tired. I'd spent that morning installing a specimen birch tree for a client in the city, and my shoulders ached. I took the pen he offered. "Here?" I'd asked, pointing to a line flagged with a pink sticky note. "Perfect. You're a lifesaver." I signed because they were family. Because that's what you do. Now, sitting in my apartment with the video evidence glowing on my screen, I understood. Buried somewhere in that stack, probably in the middle, camouflaged by permit applications and municipal forms, had been a waiver. Something that said I acknowledged the upcoming sale. Something that said I released any claim to improvements made to the property. Something that, in Evan's mind, would make stealing $300,000 of my work legally defensible. He'd underestimated two things. First, I don't sign contracts without reading them, even at parties, even when I'm tired. That waiver, whatever it said, would have my signature on the wrong line, or the wrong date, or some other fatal defect that I'd engineered instinctively even in my exhaustion. Second, I don't need a contract to protect what's mine. I already had one, so I protected myself in advance. I didn't call Scarlett to scream. That's what the crazy older sister would do, the role they'd been trying to cast me in since we were children. The one who was too sensitive, too intense, who couldn't take a joke. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and called David Ross. He answered on the second ring. David always answered. That's why his hourly rate made my accountant wince. Nora, it's 11 at night. This better be good. David, I said, my voice level, almost pleasant. Remember that consignment agreement we drafted for the Bennett Estate showroom? The one your parents signed without reading? Yes. I need you to prepare the asset recovery protocols. We have 35 hours. There was a pause. Then, with the tone of a man who'd just realized his evening was about to become far more interesting. What happened? They're selling the house on December 21st at 10 a.m., foreign investors, cash deal. They're trying to include my inventory as part of the real estate to inflate the price. Can you prove it? I have a video confession. High definition. Time-stamped. Another pause. Longer this time. Then David laughed, a short, sharp sound like a blade being drawn. Forward everything. I'll have the documentation ready by 8 a.m. Nora? Yes? This is going to be beautiful. I hung up and returned to the security footage. I watched the video 3 more times, memorizing every word, every gesture, Scarlett's careless laugh, Evan's predatory grin. By the 4th viewing, I felt nothing at all. That's when I knew I was ready. Dawn broke over the city on December 20th with a bruising purple light, turning the frost on my apartment windows into sheets of burning crystal. I'd been awake for hours, sitting at my dining table with my laptop open, surrounded by 5 years' worth of invoices, contracts, and botanical certification documents. By the time I walked into David's office shortly after 8, the city was fully awake, unaware of the legal war I was about to launch. David's office occupied the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown. The kind of place where the receptionist's desk cost more than a sedan, and the coffee came from beans that had been blessed by Tibetan monks or some equally ridiculous provenance. David himself was 55, gray-haired, and possessed the particular smile of a man who genuinely enjoyed destroying people in court. He was smiling now. You weren't exaggerating, he said, gesturing to the screen where my security footage played on loop. This is prosecutorial-grade evidence. Your brother-in-law-to-be is a moron. He's a real estate agent, I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. He understands property law the way a line cook understands chemistry. Enough to be dangerous. Walk me through the botanical angle again. This is where we win. I opened my laptop and pulled up the technical diagrams, cross-sections of root systems, photographs of underground installations, certification documents from horticultural engineering firms. Evan's entire strategy relies on the legal principle of fixtures, I explained. In property law, anything permanently attached to the land, anything that's rooted in the native soil, becomes part of the real estate. If I had planted those trees directly into the ground, he'd be right. They'd belong to whoever owns the deed. But you didn't. No, every single high-value specimen on that property, every ancient podocarpus, every Japanese maple, every ornamental pear tree is planted inside what we call root control bags. They're industrial-grade fabric containers that prevent roots from spreading into native soil. To the naked eye, the trees look like they're planted normally. Underground, they're essentially in enormous pots. I rotated the diagram on screen, showing the barrier between the specimen roots and the earth. Biologically and legally, I continued, Their roots have never touched my parents' property. The trees aren't fixtures. They're chattels, movable personal property consigned to the estate under a temporary display agreement. They belong to Bennett Greenery. They always have. David leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. And you can prove this? I have installation records, purchase receipts, and third-party certification from horticultural engineers. Every tree, every shrub, every blade of ornamental grass. It's all documented as inventory. What about the koi pond? Portable water feature. The liner, the filtration system, the lighting, all removable. The fish themselves are Bennett Greenery assets. I have individual RFID tags on every single koi. They're worth $50,000, David. They're not pets, they're inventory. He was grinning now. You magnificent, paranoid genius. I prefer thorough. We spent the next hour reviewing the contract I'd signed with my father 5 years ago. David had drafted it himself, and reading it now was like watching a master chess player explain why they'd sacrificed a pawn 12 moves earlier. Clause 7. Bennett. Greenery retains full ownership of all botanical specimens, water features, and installation materials consigned to the property for display purposes. Said materials remain the exclusive property of Bennett Greenery, and may be removed at any time should the client terminate the agreement, or should asset security be compromised. Clause 12. Acceleration clause. In the event the agreement is terminated prior to the completion of the 10-year term, all waived maintenance fees shall become immediately due and payable. Monthly maintenance fee schedule attached as Appendix C. I'd never charged my parents maintenance fees. For 5 years, I'd donated approximately 15 hours per week, keeping that garden immaculate, pruning, fertilizing, treating for pests, adjusting irrigation systems, replacing seasonal plantings. The contract specified this would be provided free of charge for 10 years, unless they broke the contract early. Pull up Appendix C, David said. I did. The maintenance fee schedule appeared on screen. $750 per month, escalating by 3% annually to account for inflation. 60 months at an average of $780 per month. Approximately $46,000 in waived fees. Add removal costs, David said quietly. Crane rental, labor, equipment, transport. Another $20,000, easy. Then penalties for breach of contract, let's be conservative and say $10,000. Round it to $75,000. Make it $95,000, I said. Include emergency relocation fees and compensation for business disruption. I have to cancel client meetings to handle this. $95,000 it is. David pulled out a legal pad and began drafting. If they don't pay within 30 days, you file a mechanic's lien against the property. The house becomes legally frozen, they can't sell it, can't refinance it, can't transfer the deed. It stays on public record like a scarlet letter until they pay every cent. I watched him write, his fountain pen scratching across expensive paper. David, I said quietly. Evan and Scarlett think they're going to kick me to the curb and pocket $400,000 of my work. I know. My parents are letting it happen. They're complicit. They didn't even warn me. David stopped writing and looked up. His expression was gentle, almost fatherly. Nora, this isn't revenge. This is asset protection. You invested $300,000 and 5 years of skilled labor. They're attempting to commit what amounts to corporate theft. What you're doing, taking back your property, is the most rational, professional response possible. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I nodded. My throat felt tight. When do you want to move? He asked. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. The same time as the showing? No, right before. I want to be pulling out of the driveway just as they're pulling in. That afternoon, I returned to Bennett Greenery's main facility, a 3-acre compound in the industrial district with greenhouses, equipment yards, and a staff of 47 skilled workers. These people weren't employees. They were craftsmen, arborists who could diagnose tree diseases by touch, irrigation specialists who understood hydrology like classical musicians understood Bach, equipment operators who could thread a crane hook through a 6-inch gap without scratching bark. They were loyal to me because I paid them well, treated them with respect, and never asked them to cut corners. I gathered the senior crew in the main office. Marcus, my head arborist, Jenny, who managed logistics, and Tom, who operated our heavy equipment like an extension of his own body. Emergency relocation, I said without preamble. Site: the Bennett Estate. Time: tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. We're pulling everything, every tree, the pond system, the irrigation network, full asset recovery. Marcus raised an eyebrow. He was 60 years old, had been in the landscaping industry since before I was born, and had approximately zero tolerance for drama. Your parents' place, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Are they selling the house? Trying to, with our inventory listed as part of the property value. He nodded slowly. You want the crane truck? I want all 3 crane trucks. I want the water tankers. I want every available flatbed and every piece of extraction equipment we own. I want it to look like a military operation. Jenny was already pulling up schedules on her tablet. We'll need to cancel the Preston job. Cancel it. Tell them we'll comp them 50% for the inconvenience. Nora, Tom said carefully, if we're pulling mature trees with root bags, we're going to leave some serious holes in the ground. I know. The lawn's going to look like a geometric Swiss cheese. I'm counting on it. Understanding dawned on their faces. Marcus smiled, rare and sharp. How long do we have? He asked. 16 hours. Then we'd better get started. By evening, every piece of equipment had been inspected, fueled, and staged in the yard. The crew had run through the extraction sequence twice. We'd loaded the water tankers with temporary holding tanks for the koi fish. We'd prepared straps, rigging, and support structures for specimens worth more than most people earned in a year. I stood in the equipment yard as the sun set, watching my team work with the precision of a surgical unit preparing for a complex operation. My phone rang. Mom appeared on the screen. I answered. Nora, honey. Her voice was honey sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. Can you come by early tomorrow? Around 9? Evan has some friends coming over to see the house. Maybe you could trim the hedges? Make it look nice for your sister? Friends, not buyers, not investors. She was lying. They all knew what was happening tomorrow, and they wanted me to show up and play the role of the helpful daughter one last time, to make their stolen garden look perfect for the people who would help them profit from my work. That lie killed the last ember of guilt I'd been nursing. Don't worry, Mom, I said, my voice warm and guileless. By tomorrow morning, the garden will look exactly like it's supposed to. Oh, wonderful, you're such a good daughter. I don't know what we'd do without you. I hung up without saying goodbye. Then I returned to my office, where David had emailed the final documentation. I printed everything: the consignment agreement, the technical certifications, the maintenance fee invoice, $95,000 in bold red ink at the bottom. I organized it all into a 3-ring binder with colored tabs. Legal, professional, irrefutable. Then I printed one more thing: a simple company directive on Bennett Greenery letterhead: asset security compromised, immediate retrieval authorized. I signed it, dated it December 20th, and placed it in the front of the binder. Tomorrow morning, I wouldn't be the hurt daughter, the betrayed sister, the underestimated eldest child. I would be the CEO of a $3 million company recovering stolen property. Sleep was a ghost that refused to visit that night, but not because of anxiety. My mind was simply too active, running through logistics, reviewing contingencies, anticipating reactions. By the time my alarm went off at 5:30 on the morning of December 21st, I'd already been awake for an hour, watching the winter dawn turn my apartment windows from black to gray to pale gold. I dressed carefully: work boots, dark jeans, a Bennett Greenery jacket with the company logo embroidered over the heart. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw what I needed to see: not a daughter, but a professional handling a business matter. By 7 a.m., I was at the warehouse, where the crew had already assembled. Marcus handed me a travel mug of coffee without a word, the gesture of someone who understood that some mornings required silence instead of sympathy. We went through the plan one final time. The convoy would consist of 3 crane trucks, 2 flatbeds, 1 water tanker, and my personal pickup. We'd park down the street at 9:45 a.m. At my signal, we'd enter the property and begin the extraction sequence. Trees first, starting with the most valuable specimens, then the koi pond system, then the irrigation network. Estimated time: 90 minutes for full asset recovery. Remember, I told them, we are not destroying property, we are removing inventory. Everything we take belongs to Bennett Greenery. Everything we leave behind belongs to the property owner. Are we clear? 47 voices answered in unison. Clear. Then let's go get our trees. The convoy rolled out at 9:15 a.m., a rumbling procession of industrial vehicles that turned heads on the highway. I drove at the front in my pickup, watching in the rearview mirror as 7 massive trucks followed me through morning traffic like a steel and chrome parade. We reached my parents' neighborhood, an affluent suburb where lawns were measured in acres and every house had a 3-car garage. The houses here were what real estate agents called executive properties, priced in the millions, owned by people who believed wealth was evidence of virtue. I pulled onto a side street with clear sightlines to my parents' driveway and killed the engine. Behind me, the convoy went silent. Tom climbed down from his crane truck and walked up to my window. "We wait?" he asked. "We wait." I pulled out my phone and opened a notes app, where I'd been documenting everything: the timestamps, the video footage, the conversations. Documentation is armor, evidence is power. At 9:47 a.m., movement caught my eye. A convoy of black SUVs turned onto the street, followed by a champagne-colored Bentley that probably cost more than my entire equipment fleet. The vehicles moved with the unhurried confidence of money that had forgotten what it felt like to wait for anything. I raised my binoculars. Through the magnified lenses, I watched the cars pull into the circular driveway of my parents' estate. Doors opened. Men in expensive suits emerged, 3 of them, plus a woman in a camel hair coat that probably cost what my crew made in a month. They moved like people accustomed to owning things: airports, companies, politicians. Evan appeared at the front door, grinning so wide I could see it from 200 yards away. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen before, new, probably bought specifically for this meeting. Scarlett stood beside him in a designer dress, her Instagram-ready smile locked in place. My father appeared next, then my mother, both dressed like they were attending a country club gala rather than conducting a business transaction. I watched Evan gesture toward the backyard, saw the investors follow him through the side gate. In moments, they'd be standing beside my koi pond, admiring the reflection of Japanese maples in crystal-clear water, calculating how much extra they'd pay for this kind of craftsmanship. I checked my watch. 9:55 a.m. I picked up my radio. "All units, this is Nora. Move out." Behind me, 7 diesel engines roared to life. The sound was magnificent thunder in mechanical form, the deep bass rumble of industrial power awakening. I led the convoy around the corner, and we rolled up to the estate like a military incursion arriving to liberate occupied territory. The lead crane truck backed through the open gate at exactly 10 a.m., its warning beeper cutting through the morning air like an alarm. I saw Evan's head snap around, saw his expression cycle through confusion, recognition, and then pure, crystalline horror. He started running. I stepped out of my truck and walked calmly toward the backyard, carrying the 3-ring binder under my arm. Behind me, my crew deployed with practiced efficiency. Marcus coordinating tree removal, Jenny managing equipment placement, Tom positioning the crane. The backyard was transformed from my last visit. Someone had added white tent canopies and cocktail tables. Classical music played from hidden speakers. The investors stood on the stone patio overlooking the koi pond, champagne flutes in hand, looking at the garden the way collectors examined rare paintings. Evan reached me just as I entered through the gate. His face had gone pale, his expensive suit already rumpled from the sprint. "Nora!" His voice cracked on my name. "What are you? You can't! I have clients here!" I didn't look at him. Instead, I walked past him toward the group of investors, who had turned to watch this unexpected development, with the detached interest of people accustomed to reality, occasionally diverging from their expectations. I raised a small megaphone, nothing aggressive, just enough to be heard over the equipment noise. "Good morning, gentlemen, madam. I apologize for the interruption. My name is Nora Bennett, owner and CEO of Bennett Greenery." I kept my voice professional, pleasant even. "The garden you're currently viewing is not part of the real estate. It consists of inventory owned by my company and consigned to this property under a temporary display agreement. That agreement has been terminated due to asset security concerns. This viewing is over." One of the investors, an older man with silver hair and the particular stillness of serious wealth, raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" the landscape architect who designed and installed everything you're looking at, the daughter of the homeowners, and the person who's about to remove $300,000 worth of company property. Evan had recovered enough to start shouting, "This is insane, officer." He was gesturing frantically toward a bored-looking police officer who'd been hired, I assumed, to provide security for the showing. "Arrest her. She's trespassing. She's destroying property." The officer walked over, hand resting casually on his belt. He was about 50, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades dealing with family disputes and rich people's problems. "Ma'am, what's going on here?" I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply opened the binder and handed it to him, already tabbed to the relevant sections. Tab 1. Consignment Agreement, signed by the property owner, establishing Bennett Greenery's ownership of all botanical specimens and installations. Tab 2. Technical certification from horticultural engineers, confirming that all trees are planted in root control barriers, making them movable chattels rather than real estate fixtures. Tab 3. Proof of ownership, including purchase receipts and RFID tracking for all koi fish. The officer read slowly, flipping between tabs. I saw his expression shift from skepticism to comprehension, to something approaching professional respect. He closed the binder and turned to Evan. "Sir, this is a civil matter regarding personal property. She has documentation proving these trees and installations are movable company assets. I can't stop her from retrieving her own property." "But she's ruining the sale." "That's a civil matter, sir, not a criminal one." Evan's face cycled through several colors. Behind him, my mother had appeared, her hand pressed to her mouth in horror. My father stood frozen on the patio, champagne glass still in hand, his expression unreadable. I turned back to the investors, who were watching this unfold with the kind of fascinated attention people usually reserved for car accidents. Again, my apologies for the disruption. If you're interested in the property itself, I recommend conducting your viewing after the current complications are resolved. The silver-haired investor smiled slight, knowing. "I think we've seen enough. Good luck with your business, Miss Bennett." They turned and walked back toward their vehicles, moving with the unhurried grace of people for whom this inconvenience was merely amusing rather than devastating. I waited until they'd cleared the gate. Then I turned to Marcus and gave the signal. "Extract everything." The first crane moved into position beside the oldest podocarpus tree, a 40-year-old specimen I'd sourced from a specialty nursery in Oregon, transported cross-country, and installed with the kind of care usually reserved for priceless artifacts. It was worth $60,000. It was the centerpiece of the entire garden. Tom operated the crane with surgeon-like precision. The support straps went around the trunk, carefully positioned to avoid bark damage. The crane's hydraulics hissed. The straps tightened. Then, with a deep, wet tearing sound that made my mother gasp, the tree began to rise. Because of the root control bag, the extraction was clinically precise. There was no violent ripping of earth. The tree lifted clean, its root ball contained in the industrial fabric cylinder, like a plug being pulled from a socket. It left behind a perfectly round, dark geometric void in the manicured lawn. It looked less like a hole and more like a missing component in a complex machine. "Secure it, and move to specimen 2, I said into my radio. The ballet continued. Another tree rose into the air. Another perfect black circle opened in the green grass. The Japanese maples came next, then the ornamental cherries. Then the understory plantings, tens of thousands of dollars worth of carefully cultivated specimens lifted and loaded onto flatbed trucks with the efficiency of a practice team. Scarlett appeared at my elbow, her face streaked with mascara. "Nora, please stop. We can talk about this. We can work something out." I didn't look at her. "There's nothing to work out. I'm taking back my property." "But the garden was never yours." Behind us, the industrial pumps roared to life. My crew lowered them into the koi pond, and within seconds, the crystal clear water began draining into the tanker truck. The koi fish, each one tagged, documented, and worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, were netted and transferred to portable holding tanks with professional care. As the water level dropped, the pond's true nature became visible. A concrete basin, ugly and utilitarian, stained with algae, crisscrossed with exposed PVC pipes and electrical conduits. Without water and the careful biology I'd maintained, It looked like what it really was, an empty hole lined with aging concrete. The water drained completely. The pond sat exposed and pathetic, like a swimming pool in winter. One of the investors, the woman in the camel hair coat, had paused at the gate to watch. She looked at the devastation, looked at Evan, shook her head with something between disgust and pity, and walked away. The Bentley's engine started. The convoy of SUVs followed. They left without another word. The sale was over. The sun had barely climbed higher in the sky, yet the backyard looked like a natural disaster had visited exclusively the landscaped areas while leaving the house itself untouched. 7 perfect, dark cylinders pocked the lawn where ancient trees had stood. The koi pond was a naked concrete basin with algae stains bleeding down its walls. The irrigation system had been excavated, leaving trenches cutting across the grass like surgical incisions. The stone pathways I'd laid remained, but they now led to nothing. Decorative walkways around holes in the ground. My crew worked with the brisk efficiency of people performing routine maintenance. They didn't gawk or gossip. They loaded equipment, secured straps, and moved on to the next extraction point. This was just business to them, unusual business, admittedly, but business nonetheless. I stood on what used to be the Zen gravel garden, now just a flat circle of disturbed earth, and watched my father cross the lawn toward me. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone in shock, his expensive loafers squelching in exposed soil with each step. "Nora," his voice was hoarse, "what have you done?" "I recovered company property, as specified in Section 7, subsection B of the consignment agreement you signed 5 years ago. You destroyed your sister's future." The shock was wearing off now, transforming into the anger I'd been expecting. "You ruined the sale. You humiliated us in front of investors. All because you couldn't—" He was searching for the words, his face reddening. "Because you had to count pennies with your own family." Behind him, Scarlett was sobbing on the patio. Evan sat on the steps with his head in his hands. My mother stood in the doorway, looking like someone had just informed her that the world had ended and forgotten to give her advance notice. I reached into my messenger bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Red ink stark against the tan paper. "This is the invoice for services rendered," I said, my voice level. 5 years of landscape maintenance, waived under the terms of our agreement. However, since you attempted to sell the property before the agreement's completion, the acceleration clause is now active. All waived fees are due immediately. I handed him the envelope. He opened it with shaking hands. 5 years of monthly maintenance. I continued. At $750 per month, escalating by 3% annually to account for inflation. That's $46,800. Plus $23,000 in emergency extraction costs. Plus $15,000 in penalties for breach of contract. Plus $10,000 in compensation for disrupted business operations. I watched him read the number at the bottom. $95,000. $95,000. My father whispered. "You're charging your own family $95,000. I'm charging a client who violated a contract and attempted to steal $300,000 worth of my assets. Yes. We would have given you a cut of the sale. You would have given me nothing." I heard Evan's exact words. "Once the ink dries, we kick Nora to the curb." My father's face went slack. "You heard? I have security cameras monitoring my inventory. You think I'd leave $50,000 worth of koi fish unprotected? I have the entire conversation on video, time-stamped. Cloud-backed. Legally admissible." Scarlett had stopped crying. She was staring at me now with something approaching hatred. "You were spying on us?" "I was monitoring my assets. You were caught planning theft. Family doesn't treat family like this." My mother had found her voice, shrill and breaking. "We raised you. We fed you. We put you through college. And this is how you repay us? With lawyers and invoices and humiliation?" The word hung in the air. Humiliation. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt the last thread connecting us snap like a rotten cord. "You didn't put me through college," I said quietly. "I paid my own way with scholarships and student loans I finished paying off 3 years ago. You didn't raise me to be successful, you raised me to be useful. The good daughter. The one who solved problems and asked for nothing." I gestured at the devastated yard. "I invested $300,000 into this property. I worked 15 hours a week for 5 years maintaining it. I brought you clients and prestige and a garden that probably added $500,000 to your property value, and your response was to steal it and sell it without even the courtesy of a warning. We weren't stealing. Yes, you were. And you were too arrogant to think I'd notice, or too confident I'd be too meek to stop you. I picked up my messenger bag and started walking toward my truck. My father called after me. Nora, we can't pay this. We don't have $95,000. I stopped at the gate and turned back. The morning sun illuminated the disaster zone that used to be a garden holes, exposed pipes, and 4 people standing in the wreckage of their own greed. Then I suggest you start liquidating assets, I said. You have 30 days. If payment isn't received in full, I'll file a mechanic's lien against the property. The title will be frozen. You won't be able to sell, refinance, or transfer the deed until the debt is satisfied. The lien will appear on every title search. It will sit there, on public record, announcing to everyone that you tried to steal from your contractor and she had to take you to court to get paid. You wouldn't, my mother whispered. I already have the paperwork drafted. David Ross is waiting for my call. I climbed into my truck. Through the windshield, I saw Evan stand up, his face twisted with rage. He was shouting something, gesturing violently. I couldn't hear him over the diesel engines, and I didn't need to. I put the truck in gear and led my convoy out of the neighborhood. 7 vehicles loaded with recovered assets, leaving behind a family that had confused love with leverage. The afternoon dissolved into the controlled chaos of asset relocation. Every tree was inspected, documented, and settled into temporary holding areas at the warehouse. The koi fish were transferred to our climate-controlled indoor facility, where they'd stay until I could relocate them to a client project or my next showroom site. The irrigation equipment was cleaned, inventoried, and stored. By evening, every single item had been accounted for. Not one specimen lost, not one system damaged. My crew celebrated with pizza and beer in the warehouse break room, the comfortable celebration of professionals who'd executed a complex operation flawlessly. I handed out cash bonuses, $200 per person, pulled from my own wallet, and thanked each of them personally. Marcus lingered after the others had gone home. He leaned against the doorframe of my office, arms crossed, watching me update spreadsheets. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. I stopped typing and looked up at him. Marcus had known me for 15 years. He'd watched me build this company from a 2-person operation, run out of a rented garage to a multi-million-dollar firm with a waiting list of clients. I lost my family today, I said quietly. You lost people who didn't value you. That's not the same thing. I nodded, not trusting my voice. You did the right thing, Marcus continued. Professional, legal, fair. You gave them a contract. They signed it. They broke it. You enforced it. That's not revenge, Nora. That's business. Then why does it feel like revenge? Because they wanted you to feel guilty for protecting yourself. Because they've spent 42 years training you to put their needs above your own dignity. He pushed off the doorframe. Don't let them rewrite this story. You're not the villain. You're just the first person who refused to play the victim. After he left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the updated inventory spreadsheet. $300,000 in assets recovered, $95,000 in debt owed. Everything documented, everything legal, everything empty. I went home, poured a glass of wine, and sat on my balcony watching the city lights. My phone buzzed constantly, calls from my mother, my father, Scarlett's number, even a few from Evan. I let them all go to voicemail. The silence of the night was shattered at 2:47 a.m. on December 22nd. My phone exploded with alerts, not the usual security notifications, but the emergency alarm system I'd installed at the warehouse. Motion detected. Perimeter breach. Gate B compromised. I was dressed and in my truck within minutes. I drove with white-knuckled focus, the empty city streets blurring past. The warehouse was normally a 15-minute drive. I made it in 9. As I screeched into the parking lot, I saw the blinding white glare of the security floodlights washing over the loading dock. A figure was hunched by the door to the fish facility, frantically working a pair of bolt cutters. I didn't need to guess who it was. I slammed my truck into park just as blue and red lights flooded the scene from the street entrance. The police, alerted by the silent alarm service, were pulling in right behind me. Scarlett spun around, shielding her eyes from the glare. A gallon jug of bleach sat at her feet. "Police! Drop the cutters!" I stepped out of my truck and watched as 2 officers advanced on her with weapons drawn. Scarlett dropped the bolt cutters with a clang, screaming something incoherent about fairness. They had her cuffed and against the hood of the patrol car within seconds. I walked over. Officer Morrison, who I knew from commercial projects, looked at the bleach jug, then at the severed fence, then at me. "Miss Bennett," he said. "She cut through the fence. Caught her trying to break into the fish tanks with that bleach. That's premeditated destruction of property." My heart went cold. The fish were worth $50,000. Bleach would have killed them in agony. Scarlett saw me then. She lunged against the cuffs, her face twisted and ugly. "You ruined my life. I'll kill those fish. I'll kill everything you love." "You're drunk," I said, my voice flat. "She is," Morrison agreed. "We're arresting her for trespassing, possession of burglary tools, and attempted felony vandalism, plus DUI, since she drove here." He paused. "She's your sister. You sure you want to press full charges?" I looked at the bleach. I thought about the koi gasping for air. "I took back my property legally," I said. "She tried to destroy it criminally. Press every charge you can." As they shoved Scarlett into the back of the cruiser, I stood in the cold night air and felt a strange sense of clarity. The next morning, I learned the fallout was complete. Evan's firm, hearing about the arrest and the disastrous open house, had fired him to protect their reputation. The investors had pulled out completely. And my parents were now scrambling to find bail money while staring down a $95,000 debt. David Ross called me that evening. "They want to settle. They're offering $40,000. No. They say they can't pay." "Then I file the lien tomorrow. Full amount, no installments. The house stays frozen until I get every cent." "Understood," David said. "I'll file it in the morning." Christmas Eve arrived with the electric energy of a city shutting down for the holiday. My penthouse apartment glowed with warm light, filled not with blood relatives, but with my crew, the 47 people who had operated the cranes and driven the trucks. We weren't celebrating Christmas. We were celebrating a record year. I moved through the room, handing out envelopes. When Tom opened his and saw the extra $5,000, he looked up, eyes shining. Marcus raised his beer. "To Nora Bennett." "To the team," I corrected, raising my glass. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, buzzing relentlessly against the marble. "Missed call. Mom, 12. Missed call. Dad, 8. The screen lit up with a text from Mom. "Please, Nora, drop the charges. Evan left her. She's all alone in jail on Christmas. We can't pay the lien. We are family." I looked at the message for a long second. Then, I simply flipped the phone face down. I picked up my wine glass and turned my back on the counter, rejoining the laughter in the living room. I had found my real family, the people who respected my value. 3 months later, spring arrived, but the for sale sign in my parents' front yard remained, weathered and tilting. No one wanted to buy the house. The mechanic's lien sat on the title like a tumor, scaring away every lender. The backyard was still a cratered mud pit because they couldn't afford to fix it. I stood on the balcony of the new 5-star resort I had just finished designing, phone to my ear. "Nora," David Ross said. Their lawyer, Robert Vance, reached out. "Your parents sold off their antique furniture collection to scrape together some cash. They're offering $65,000 to settle the debt today." "The debt is $95,000, I said, watching the sunset. "They say it's all they have." "Then they can sell the car, or the house itself once they pay me." "I don't negotiate with people who tried to steal from me, David. 95,000. Not a penny less." "Understood," David replied. "I'll tell them." I hung up and walked down to the resort's central courtyard. There, planted in the most prestigious positions, stood the rescued podocarpus trees. They were lush, majestic, and putting down fresh roots in soil prepared to nurture them. They had survived the winter, just like me. I touched the rough bark of the largest tree, feeling the solid life beneath my palm. "Sorry for the rough ride," I whispered to it. "But you're safe now. Nobody is going to uproot us ever again." We had both survived the winter, and now, finally, we were ready to grow.